All right, good evening. It's Monday, February 2nd. This is the February meeting of the Narberth Planning Commission at 7 p.m. at Borough Hall. We will begin by taking roll, and then we will walk through the agenda for this evening. So, as I call your name. So I'm Adam Crom, Chair. Ralph.
Present.
President on Zoom, Jennifer.
Present.
President Todd Cressy.
Present.
Heidi. Present. Brian.
Present.
Aaron Graves.
Present.
And David Greenberg.
Present.
And we have borough staff, Emily Masanos here. And we have anyone on Zoom.
No.
That is the roll. So our agenda for this evening includes announcements, chair's update, and the Montgomery County Planning Commission update, although I don't know if we don't have Adam. There he is. Adam Schatz is here from Montgomery County Planning Commission. Then we're going to review the minutes from January meeting that Emily circulated. Then we have a presentation from MCPC on the analysis of housing affordability. Then we have discussion of our business topics. First is zoning recodification. Steve Jobs joined the chat. And which is the content neutral restating of the zoning code. Then if we, based on how much time we have left, we'll have the discussion of the 4A zoning district, which we've been discussing for several meetings. Concept for changes to that zoning district that may or may not allow for more housing. We will have a discussion of our plan for the February 26th Borough Council and Planning Commission open house that we have scheduled here at Borough Hall. And we'll review the annual report, which is due in March, for our work in 2025 as a body. Followed by a chance for any public comment, and then we will adjourn. That is the agenda for this evening. So the first item is the chair's update. I don't have very much, but you did receive an email notification, but I'll just remind you that tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. there is a public meeting about the Montgomery Avenue corridor study at Lower Marion Township building in Ardmore in the boardroom. So at this meeting, the current study draft will be presented, and they'll be taking public feedback on the data that they've gathered and perspectives of anyone on Montgomery Avenue. And so the township building is at 75 East Lancaster Avenue in Ardmore. And this is a grant that's funded through the federal Safe Streets for All grant program, which is competitively bid and or competitively, I guess, awarded to applicants. And the borough is a financial partner with Lower Marion Township on the local match. So this is looking at, in particular, trying to improve safety along the corridor, reducing crashes, and just generally making improvements to transportation in the corridor. So I encourage anyone interested in that topic to attend if you can. Looking forward to seeing how that goes next. Next, I'll turn it over to Adam Schatz to discuss any updates from the CPC.
Yeah, I don't really have any updates. I'm going to be presenting a couple of things today for you guys, so might as well just jump into that. Emily, is it possible to connect to the?
I think you can request to share your screen, and then I can just let you do it through the Zoom meeting.
That's your presentation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first we will consider the minutes
Okay.
for January, which Emily sent via email. Are there any remarks or corrections to the meeting minutes? Okay, would someone like to move to adopt meeting minutes?
I moved to adopt the meeting minutes.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt meeting minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention, so it is, the motion carries. Now we will turn,
Okay.
if you're, are you ready?
Yeah, I don't have the link to the Zoom.
Here, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, but yeah, we've been talking about portability for some time and, we've got this open house scheduled in 26th. I know Adam Crum has provided a fair amount of data, in the past year, particularly ACS data, things like that. I just wanted to share some county data that is interesting that I'd like to incorporate and discuss. Sorry.
I just emailed it to you.
But basically. Still waiting for that email. Yeah, so at this open house, we definitely want to discuss. A lot of that ACS data, affordability in Northbrook. But what the county has that we can share with you all is sales data, median sales data. Really, we have it for the last 20 years, but I'm focused mostly on the last 10 years. And it's really interesting to compare Northbrook with the county, maybe some other municipalities as well.
Okay, here, I can make you a co-host.
Yeah, so essentially, we've got some data here on median sales price in the borough. And just comparing it to Lower Merion Township at the moment, as well as the county. But in 2014, so a little over 10 years ago now, the median sales price in Northbrook was $570,000. And that's adjusted based on inflation to 2023. And then in 2023, Northbrook actually had the highest median sales price in the entire county at $751,000. So that was very surprising and to our office. And I don't want to, alarm you completely. It's not still the highest. It wasn't in 2024, but it speaks to some of the development pressure that's been happening in the borough. So that's, a 32% increase from 2014 to 2023. And within that, we really saw that there's kind of pre-COVID and post-COVID. So basically, right at 2020, from 2020 to 2021, there was an over $100,000 increase in the sales price, as well as from 2022 to 2023, it was about $150,000. It was pretty surprising to me. And since it has gone down a bit from 2023 to 2024, so it's no longer the highest in the county, and that's a good thing. But why is this happening? What can we do about it? That's kind of the goal of this conversation. And you can see kind of Lower Merion is usually at the top of the county in terms of sales price. And we break this down by the different housing types. So that's why it's really important to see it at that level, to see kind of what's contributing to this. So let's take a look at the different housing types. So we the darker greenish colored is the Narberth. So the solid line is single family detached in Narberth. Median sales price inflation adjusted in 2014, 2024.
Recording for progress.
So you can see there's been kind of like a couple of peaks, 2016, around a little over 80,000. And then 2022 was kind of the peak at an inflation adjusted number of just over $1 billion. So that was really high for single family detached homes.
So this is filtering for sure that it's just single family units.
This is just single family detached. Yeah. This is absolutely, our data. In fact, David is the expert. He puts together this data. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're good so far.
Then single family attached, so that includes twins, that includes townhomes, anything with a shared entrance, really, that's not an apartment. So you can see that has been relatively steady, but I noticed in 2023, kind of when it had its peak, a little under $600,000. That's the year 2023 that Narberth at its highest was the highest median sales price in the county. So just something to consider. Don't know, obviously it's correlated for that year, but just something to note. And then I've also included kind of county data in red. So you'll see that single family attached in Narberth is kind of along this trend line for Montgomery County for single family detached, which just shows the pressure of the prices here. And the county obviously has a lot more data. It's kind of slower increasing trend line, whereas Narberth is kind of up and down. And that's really due to the number of houses being sold each year. So it's really between 50 and 70 houses sold each year. Pre-COVID, it's probably like 65 houses sold a year versus post-COVID, it's more like 54, 5. Or not houses, I should say, units. Then also you can take a look at multifamily here. Now, some of the data is missing from this for Narberth. When there were only like 1 or 2 sales for a year, you can see that's actually gone down a little bit. From 2014, 2015, this is the green dots. It's about 300,000. So it's gone down about 200,000. It'll be really interesting to see the next release of data for 2025, since we had here 3 apartment buildings come online, and all of that's going to be filtered for the 2025 data coming out in June. But I have included for 2025 just the numbers, the number of units that have been added, which I'll show in a minute. Yeah, so this is just unit sales, just showing, I was just talking about how to in terms of total unit sales. And this is between single family detached, single family attached, and multifamily. Apartments. Mixed-use buildings. So we how that data changes. But
Pretty consistent rate though,
relatively consistent between, so it's gonna,
50 plus.
yes, 50 plus, so market is strong. Yeah, but 2025 is gonna look completely different, because you'll have, I think it's 49 units that came online for multifamily. 2025, so that's
Is that, so those are, this is sales data though, right?
so condos. Sorry, it's this good one, so we'll have to see what the actual sales data is. That was units, that I just said. We don't have that.
A lot of rentals.
Yeah. Yeah, so rental data, we definitely need to use the ACS data, which, is helpful, but it has kind of median rents, that type of thing to see. Then you'll really see in the ACS data that more renters are cost burdened than folks that are buying homes. But yeah, that's something we definitely want to delve into and dig into with the data. Any questions?
What township's the highest, out of curiosity?
I mean, Lower Marion, especially for like single family detached. They averaged their median sale, it's like about $1 million. For last year.
Probably bigger units.
Yes, bigger units. Yeah. But yeah, definitely want to, I still have a lot of data to collect, and put together for the open house, a lot of the ACS data that I've been talking about, but wanted to kind of open this up for discussion with everybody.
What was the total increase? What was you said the from start to end, what was like 35% or something?
Yeah.
What year to what year?
From 2013 to, or 2014 to 2023.
What percentage increase?
32% increase in inflation adjustment. Yeah,
Inflation adjusted.
inflation adjustment, yeah, so that's
Real dollars, it's more.
much more, yeah. Now, if you compare 2014 to 2024, when Marvin kind of comes back a little bit down to earth, it's not as striking of a number, but I just wanted to show that 10-year period. what we're talking about. But yeah, obviously this is concerning, so we have to think about strategies to address some of these affordability concerns, providing different housing types, is one of the kind of potential solutions to trying to reduce the cost burden, or at least how much it costs to cover from a housing standpoint. Yeah. Open that up for discussion.
Questions for that?
Question. Yeah, this is a problem we've had every time we try to consider the data. I mean, it's such a small data set.
Yes.
And within the data set, there are so many variables that are accounted for. Like, is it a new house, is it an old house, how many square feet is it? And I find it really hard to walk away from this understanding much at all. To be honest with you, I mean, it feels like there's just too much variability in the set to be able to, and it's not big enough to sort of even out.
So that's definitely true. That's definitely true. But you do see a shift pre versus post COVID. There's definitely a trend pre-COVID of the trend line pre-COVID. Housing prices were going up. But then there was just kind of a spike, a little bit of a spike. Particularly in the amount, the real dollar amount, maybe not the The real dollar amount that I'm considering in 2021 to 2020 to 2021. Three, but there was a drop last year, so that's true. That's true.
Right, it's not a trend, so it's several years.
Yeah.
The 50+ units is a statistically valid number. It's just in the median of that number of sales, and that's not a small data set. And it's- Especially for the size of the borough.
And then you look at ACS data, you also see kind of vacancy rates, particularly for homeownership. You know, like those properties, just there's so few for sale units available. I mean, we're seeing 50 a year, so maybe that ACS data is not really as accurate. But vacancy rates are more so, people that are, I don't know.
Be the turnover.
This house is on the market. Higher prices.
Yeah, that's.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion?
I will say we typically do the median housing sales report in usually March of each year, so we'll try to get the 2025 data in for like the open house late February, so we should be able to have that available as well, just like add another unit of that. It's kind of the perfect time, so we should be able to have that for everything else. So yeah.
And then-
You know, one of the statistics that you see on realtor sites is $1 per square foot, which might be another way of kind of understanding how the price compares to other areas in the region.
Does the MLS have that information?
Sure. I don't know. I don't need it. Right now, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like,
I mean, the truth is, for purchasing power, interest rates matter too. Right? Higher the interest rate, the more expensive the market will be for the same cost. So I think there were interest rates, what were they in 2020? Weren't they quite low?
yeah, they were,
Yeah.
what, 3% basically, half.
Yeah.
So
I think that alone is like a 20 or 30% increase in monthly payment. On the same principle, but I think something like that's where we're at like 6.5% now or 6%. Yeah, for 6, if you were buying today. So. Okay, well, why don't we move to our next agenda item? Thank you, that was, I think. So, appreciate staff time to lead that. Discuss it further with the open house. But Todd and Adam have also been working extensively on the zoning recodification draft, which only went out in the meeting minutes, so it's a lot of material to go through, but the intent is that we would talk through that recodification and see if we are ready to, provide any insights to Borough Council would also consider. Real odd.
I'll let Adam wrote his long thing there.
Yeah. So as you know, we've been working on zoning recodification for the last 6 months, and primarily we took a look at initially this structure of the zoning code, and we've come to find that since it's a form-based code, that is the intent, we'd like to reorganize the code so that it reflects that form-based nature, and much of the kind of like design and building guidelines we'd like to house underneath each of the building types. So while a user might go to their zoning district, it would probably then flipped over and connected to the building type, whatever they want to build. And from there, they would really see much of the provisions related to that building type. So it could be redirected to conditional use or what have you, but much of the substance, the code is going to be underneath each of the building types. So structurally, that's what we try to do. And if there are no questions about that, certainly take questions. I think we also made it easier to navigate the special exceptions and conditional uses because they each have their own sections now. Like true sections organized. And again, the linking between sections really makes a difference when you're navigating. Todd actually did put together a couple of tables. So we have tables obviously underneath each of the building types, but separate for uses. Todd put together allowable use by zoning district and allowable use by building type. And we really would like your feedback, particularly on the building type table. That's a work in progress. I know it was a lot to repeat, so I don't expect that. It's not through the video. If you have anything about that, we appreciate it. The coming weeks. We also made some smaller changes to the existing code to try and clarify original intent. These are policy neutral changes, so we noticed that there were terms that were undefined, particularly uses that were undefined, so went in there and added those. Also made some adjustments to definitions, apartment building. We still need feedback on because adjusting the apartment building type to be only multiple family dwelling units, that goes against one of the conditional uses. So we need to change policy for conditional use for apartment buildings and mixed use buildings on Windsor, which allows for retail. Other uses.
Okay, so we're saying apartment buildings can't have any accessory uses in this new definition.
We were thinking about it. This is something that we were exploring. So yeah, should apartment buildings, especially when it's really just for the Windsor Avenue area, should they be allowed to have secondary use when mixed use buildings are allowed there as well?
They are. And particular zone, it's just the definition needs to catch on. That's what we just trying to say.
I'm don't follow.
In the apartment building originally was defined as having only residential uses. And of course, things that are accessory to it. A gym, mailroom, however, in the Windsor Avenue district, we allow a very small amount of commercial use in an apartment building, and we are considering the same thing with 5P, as allowing a small amount of commercial use essentially. So all that means is definition of apartment building needs to be changed from only to primarily or something. Those are the kinds of changes that we're making to kind of iron out little kinks in the code.
We allow apartment buildings in 5B?
Like I said, we're proposing.
Are we proposing to allow apartment buildings?
Let's go back to the minutes, I think. We just thought we did.
No.
Okay, well then,
We,
right there.
what we did is, I mean, maybe I'm misremembering, it's correct. 5B, the only thing that we endorsed so far was that commercial only has to be, let's say, 12 or 14 feet deep off of the street facade
In a mixed use.
in a mixed use.
Okay, so that's fine, so then just ignore what I just said. At Windsor Avenue, we allow apartment buildings to have a little bit of commercial, therefore the definition needs to be changed.
I guess my question around that is why do we allow an apartment building to have a little bit of commercial and a mixed use building that's allowed in the district?
Well, I think that's because the way that it was structured, the mixed use building reads as ground floor commercial, something else, second floor. And like, you can't do the opposite and have ground floor residential and commercial above or something. So it's a particular commercial building and. Whereas the apartment building is, primarily residential, but not barring accessories to residential, which seems to me to be prudent. So that allows, as long as it's an accessory use, or like, which is probably defined by size, right? How do we define how much commercial is allowed?
In that district? In the Windsor Avenue district?
Well, in any of the districts, what are the rules that cover that? Or do the other ones not allow any commercial or?
It's only in that little area in Windsor Avenue. Other apartment buildings, that's not allowed, and how much I'd have to. Not sure.
Anyways, this is a pretty small. Yeah.
Yeah, but I personally think we should allow for accessory commercial in the. Certainly around the collar of downtown, yeah, not
Right, but this is, that's a different topic, because all we're trying to do is a neutral recodification here. So we're not trying to change the policy.
Well, that's why my ears perked up when you started talking about changing the policy.
That's because they're changing the definition, so it's consistent with what is elsewhere in the code.
Yes. Then there are a couple of provisions that I no longer out. So one of those is conditional use for conversion of civic institutional buildings within 500 feet of the spring station. That no longer applies to any buildings that are. Another provision that allow. I mean, these are specific, but existing buildings, by the district, but also in the H district. So there's really the little gym provision, so it's very specific to that particular building. So, applicable to new buildings and we added. There are a couple areas where there were site planning and design centers that were missing, so twin buildings in 3A zoning district. So the code had been amended to permit twin building lots within the historic district, but there were no planning and design standards, so we added those in line with this. Apartment buildings didn't have site planning and design standards for 3C, 4A, and 4B. Standards those. And then commercial building, I think there was a question about 4A at the time. But 4B, since building and design standards are listed and are permitted by special exception. But we have also identified potential policy changes too. To be evaluated at further time, or if something is more pressing. Maybe some codification if the planning commission. Others.
Such as,
So there are numbers. But these are things that have been discussed over the last year and beyond, so adding uses that aren't currently considered, that's not something that needs to be included within the zoning codification. And then some of these policy changes are kind of related to housing. That we discuss.
From my understanding, you're saying that there is a long list of policy changes that could be considered.
That could be considered, right? Yeah, they could be considered. They're not.
They're not reflected, right?
They're not reflected at all.
You want to come, think gallery, that's what it is. Just taking order. I'll note that your table, the new tables that you're adding on pages 42 to 44 for the like uses. There's no index at the end of what the abbreviations mean. So I mean, they're described later, I think, under those tables. I think you could use one. The proposed standards for the twins on 3A, I think there's an issue, there's a tension between the lot size and the maximum build that you could do in 3A. So right now you can build a twin on this 1,750 square foot lot, but you can only put 30% coverage on that lot. So you have like a shed, two sheds side by side as your twins. So there's an issue there. I think it's taking the standards that we already have in the area district, they don't really work for twins, is what it comes down to. So it doesn't make sense to have that. We would have to revisit that from a policy point of view.
Agreed.
To make a change. And you made a recommendation in your memo. We're talking about uses that are not described under our code.
Yeah.
Mentioned the microbrewery and the
Yeah, these have come up
indoor space.
in the last couple of years.
I was just wondering what happens if somebody comes to us and wants to build one, wants to have one of those uses in Narberth. Because they're obviously people in Pennsylvania, they're not in our code. Is that just a lawsuit waiting to happen?
Any
Or-
any applicant can propose a zoning change
Yes.
to directly to council.
Before it gets to that, there's a provision in the code that says. If a applicant is proposing a use that's not listed here, but similar to another use, they can be considered that use. So it's really a zoning officer interpretation.
Okay,
It's like the zoning officer might say, well, microbrewery, that's like a restaurant, so.
okay,
The
so
zoning
we
officer might say it's like a small industry, right? So there's that provision that lets the zoning officer use discretion. To determine whether what's proposed is close enough to something that's in the code that it can be permitted without further ado.
yeah, but like they would have a right to have a legal use of their property somewhere in Narberth if they wanted to, even if it's not on our code, right? Like if somebody wants to do something,
Well, wait, I mean, if we don't allow, well. Does the borough have to allow every land use, is that? Or no,
Agreed.
yeah,
Somewhere.
somewhere, but
Yeah.
not necessarily on a particular
all
person.
right,
So recollection is that one of the reasons why the microgrid thing came up was specifically because folks had reached out to Kevin.
yeah,
He didn't know how to deal with it at the time,
all
and
right,
I think that person passed on, but I think that was why that originally came to us back.
so if there is interest in some of these, it would behoove us to find a place for them. And set up rules for them, or fit them into existing categories, all right, so we'll keep that in mind, just wanted to figure out whether we were. What would happen if some of these concepts came to us? Thanks for that clarification.
Actually, I misspoke. Here's the actual language. It says that. Any use of similar character, impact, appearance, and intensity as any of the uses specifically permitted. Quote, in a district, shall be permitted when authorized as a special exception, so it has to go to the zoning hearing. So you would just say like, oh, the microbrewery is the same, you know,
It's like a bar.
character, impact, appearance, and intensity as a whatever,
Yeah,
then it would have to go to zoning hearing.
Is
So
it-
that's the
That's what's in
relief
there now.
valve that prevents.
prevents us from getting sued.
Well, unless you want to redefine restaurant.
Well, I mean, you could, but what Fred was asking is what if someone comes along right now?
Yeah, before we change any definition,
They have due process.
the due process is in there, so in here. Okay, thank you.
How are we going to test that this, we discussed earlier, possibly doing some exercises to test. Yes. So that
Kevin did 4 exercises. So that actually. Was no problem. I think there were 4 examples that had come up. Relatively recently. Beyond that, we just have to keep going through and check.
mean, really, a good way to test it is to. Take a recent application. And like, look and see what they want to do and see if you can follow through the zoning, and if you can understand. What would get out there.
Yeah, I was wondering if we done.
Well, Maggie and Kevin did, they did it, that's always, another way to do it. It's like Brett just did, is you sort of look at a table and figure out how am I gonna use this table, doesn't make sense, it's something missing. You could look for your own house, your own property, and say, like, suppose I wanted to do something on my property, could I do? And see if you could follow the path of the code that helps you decide what you could, just pretend you could tear your house down and build something, right? What did you do? Does the code give you a clear answer to that?
What if we took some of the more recent applications that have come in front of planning commission, like from 2025?
Well,
I know some they were more complicated, but
right,
if you're
Okay.
taking it complicated.
right. Kevin took more typical things he gets, some things are going to reach us. Which is the things he deals with more commonly. We don't ever see them though.
But yeah, in terms of next steps, I know we have a lot of moving cross reference. Thinking up to do, but. Yeah. The goals. Thanks.
If form ready to adopt. Like to recommend
That would be vote. Yeah, right now.
So the intent is that, well, we have this draft, is to go through the draft. Test it and make any recommendations back. Yeah, so I guess. What I'd like to maybe ask the commissioners to do is to send any written comments within the next 2 weeks or so. Yeah. We can try to move this back on the agenda for next month and. Perhaps it's ready to take a vote. To move it forward.
And feel free to make comments. Tim.
Is that, so I think I have a PDF. From Emily
Okay,
in the packet.
so in the packet, you're looking, yeah,
Is it possible to get, do we have a Word file that we could,
there is a Word file.
okay, that's the one that you sent me.
So that's the one.
Is there a safe version that we can make comments inside? Like,
You can make comments in that particular.
yeah, just so we don't mess it up though.
Yeah, we have it saved separately.
Okay,
We have it
yeah.
saved separately, yeah.
All right,
This one you can mess up.
perhaps people can make
We have
the,
some pretty nerdy protocols.
yeah, track changes, use comments, whatever, but people can directly comment in
Yes.
the Word version.
So just, a few of the things we'll be doing. Are. One thing that came up about a month and a half ago was that we can't conceive the 5A district as 3 sub-districts, so we're still going through it to make sure that the way that area is described is not amount to 3 sub-districts, because that would require a different path to adoption than simply recodification. We're verifying all the cross references, as Adam said, the cross references, and when this gets codified, the cross links will be really valuable to people. But even so, if you look at it, you'll see there are a ton of cross references, so you can hop and immediately thumb through the document and find where things are being referred to. We have to go through and make sure the table numbering is consistent. There's a new table numbering. How many of you have tried to use our current code and you had to look for table 6? You didn't know where table 6 was. It's like, they create that table. So we're renumbering them in a way that's consistent with the way the code is numbered, so you can easily find where they are, and then. We have to go back to the whole appendix to the code that has additional charts and tables and maps. That has to be incorporated in the numbering, but that's not relevant to you at the moment, so. One big thing we have to do is, since this is gonna be presented to council with the option of, basically repealing the old code, and replacing with a new one. So there's a lot of sections of the existing code that aren't here because they're just gonna be placed as they are. And so we have to go back and put those in. And then, for those of you who are, you know, you pay attention to like hierarchies, outline hierarchies and things like that, there are a lot of glitches in the formatting, and so the last thing we're gonna do is fix all the formatting, so it's correct. I think we're putting word through its paces on this one. We're always finding little things to verify, like, and basically everything is verified by going back to this code and making sure that it's been translated properly. So we'll be doing that over the next few weeks, while you guys, thanks. I think imagining, like, you guys, this planning commission is like a key user, and the way we use it is we use it when we're getting applications or when we're trying to change policy. So if you can imagine, like, you said an application for your property, or a past application we looked at, or make yourself up a policy question, like, I would like to allow apartments in the 3A zone, how would I do that? You know, you could then see if this code helps you understand what you might need to look at or do.
Hi, yes.
Can I make one more question? How are you ensuring that nothing from the old code that is intentionally being removed is being dropped out? Like, how do you make sure that everything that was there is in the new one? Except for things that you've determined obviously no longer apply. It's your quality control.
Well, there are a couple steps. One is, I have a copy of this in my computer that's like blacklined. So like every time something's taken out of the new code, it's blacklined.
Oh, nice, okay.
So I can track that and see if things are missing.
Right.
Secondly, I've taken a couple of the chapters, like one of the trickiest chapters is 500 standard for building design. And after we thought we translated it all, I went through it again, using this old code and looking up everything here, using like search terms and things like that to make sure it was there. So I did that with parking because that's another really tricky section. Did it with standards for building design. Did it with footnotes to the tables, because those are the tricky areas, because a lot of the code right now is actually in footnotes to tables. That's not to say things, things couldn't be missed, so we're continuing to look. The tables are all cross-checked, so the each of us looks at each zoning section independently to make sure that the things in the site plan standards and in other areas are brought into the table. So for example, I haven't looked at apartment or multifamily yet. That's something I'll do over this month. So those are some of the methods. So sometimes there's 2 or 3 different checks. But Fred, it's very challenging.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm trying to figure out how I would do it, like, I have no idea how I would do it, so.
It is challenging. So yeah, we're trying to like track all of our changes. We try to check each other's work. But yeah. Yeah, that was what was challenging about you putting together the memo was going back. I was trying to go back through several iterations that we've gone through. see what changes we made. I don't think I captured them all.
And to be like completely in the weeds, there were some things that once I pulled them apart, they weren't clear. This has to do in particular with adult uses and regulated uses. It just seemed totally illogical, and I actually had to go back and pull some ordinances and work from the ordinance. Because there were some quirks in the ordinances that were actually kind of strange, and so, but
You want to recommend a change to our rules?
there were little things like why, and actually I asked Kevin Walsh this and he hasn't answered me. Like technically smoke shops are only allowed in commercial buildings on Montgomery Avenue. Yes, I felt the same way. Why aren't they allowed in mixed use buildings? I don't know, but we have a smoke shop in a mixed use building on Montgomery Avenue. So I said this, why? So I had to go back and find the ordinance. And sure enough, the ordinance said only commercial buildings. I don't remember why that decision was made, but that's what's in the ordinance, right? I thought it was a mistake. So sometimes even we have to go back to the ordinance. And I still have that question out to Kevin, like, how is that a smoke shop in that three-story building? Because commercial buildings are only one story.
One story, yeah, I found that too. I found that a little puzzling. That might be a policy thing that we should revisit, but.
It may be, but
Yeah, but so, well, I think Kevin's probably not answering it because he's the one that permitted that smoke shop. So he made a mistake there. It sounds like. I mean, I'd forgotten that we made that.
Well, he brought up a good question, which is when was it permitted? It might have been permitted before the ordinance, but I don't think so.
I don't remember, but I don't think so. It's
I don't think so, but let's let him check the records and see.
It's a lot to,
So sometimes it means going to find the ordinance.
all right, well, I appreciate all your efforts to go through the over 100 pages of code, so it's a lot of work to square the circle here. Appreciate it. And I think that we all have some work to do to actually go read it through it and test it, so please do that in the next week or two. And we'll check in with you all for your comments, see what they are.
And if you have any questions or things you want to relay, please copy both me and Adam, so we can both be aware of things that you would like to ask about or have us check.
I sent you the link doesn't work.
I saw that,
Yeah. So I'm gonna check with EP. All right, so I would like to switch the agenda around just to sort of go in a different order that's more efficient. So I would propose that we next discuss the 2025 annual report. Then we discuss the open house on February 26th, and then we use the balance of our time for the 4A zoning district. So that we dispatch the time sensitive things first. That's okay? All right, so we did get the 2025 annual report that Jennifer prepared in the meeting minutes. Jennifer, would you like to walk us through that?
So I got a summary or an example from Emily to use, and I basically just applied the same concept. So I went through all of the meeting minutes from the 2025 meetings. We had 10 meetings last year, and summarized all of the memberships, the meetings when we held them, and then went through all of the major agenda items and action items, and just did a very brief summary without getting too specific or too detailed. And then at the end, there's sort of a summary of public engagement, which is very high level, just what topics had the most feedback. And coordination with MCPC, and a look ahead for sort of the direction of 2026, which again was really high level based on where we're at currently in February. So it's only a few pages. It's just compiling as much as I could into as short a summary as possible. So I'm not sure if anyone had a chance to read it or review it.
I skimmed it as quickly as I could.
It's a lot of information to go back through between the meeting minutes and then the notes, but we did not have a July
Yeah, well, we
meeting.
actually, I think in some ways, we only had a couple of development actions.
Yeah.
And two of them weren't really actions at all. They're just lot subdivisions. So moving lot lines around on existing houses. So it's not personally, I think it underscores there's not actually that many
Yeah.
building activities happening.
Yeah.
So we may want to
We spent much of 2025 reviewing TOD and zoning ordinances compared to actual project submissions or application.
yeah, and we had one tentative sketch plan, and that sketch plan does not work without a zoning plan.
Yeah.
So. All right, well, should we take a motion to adopt the report as is, or do you want to read it over next month and adopt next month?
I mean, I've read it. So
Yeah.
I'm very frankly to make that motion.
I mean, adopting it or whatever we have to do, I read it once and. It was sort of amazed. And so much happened, and I might have felt like not a lot happened, so. I thought it was thorough and.
Okay, well then, if everyone's comfortable with that, we can take a motion to adopt the 2025 annual report.
I will make a motion to adopt the 2025 annual report as presented to us. And I would like to add with gratitude that we'll adopt that for all of your work and putting it down. So,
I'll say.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the 2025 annual report as presented. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries, so we'll send this report to the borough as our 2025 annual report. The next item of business is the open house that is scheduled for February 26th with the Borough Council and the Planning Commission to discuss the zoning code and housing affordability. And I know that Adam has been preparing, well, we had a little sidebar discussion about how we're going to prepare for that open house and Adam, would you feel comfortable walking us through some of the concepts we've discussed?
Perfect. So, yeah, the idea is to have several different stations. We want to have a heavy focus on data, affordable, on affordability in the borough. So we'll probably have a couple of different stations around various pieces of data. We also want to have some maps. We want to make it as interactive as possible. So you can include questions along with maps, like do you see greater density or greater height in this particular area, things of that nature. So we want it to be as interactive as possible. So having, maps, sticky notes that people can use and point out their comments on these things. Yeah. I think we also just want to have, this is supposed to be educational, so talking about the different building types, so having maybe a station for each of the different building types we talked about. And then some of the zoning changes that we're proposing by the 4A as well. So the idea is that there would be, I mean, that sounds like a fair number of posters, so we kind of need to. Strategic there.
So I mean, essentially, our concept here is that first, this is interactive. So we need to capture people's thoughts, right? So that we'll have hopefully easels that people can write down people's observations, and maybe stickies that can go on posters and boards. We can ask questions, right? What are your what are your goals? What is the biggest issue? What is the biggest opportunity? What is, what do you hope to see happen in the borough? And those kinds of leading questions, and then people can put their own responses down, so we can capture that and people can see other people's responses as well. So it's a way of communicating. The second idea is that it's fact forward, so that there's this fair amount of information on, this is what we know about sale prices for homes, whatever we can gather for rents. This is what we know about demographics of the borough, how many renters, how many owners, how many households, vehicle ownership, whatever, it's all those statistics, this is the facts as we know them. I would be interested in also as much we could get on, like, I don't know if we can, but like how much household incomes are. We talked about cost burden.
Yeah.
Households, for example, but and what is the typical household income for different occupations? That's sometimes thrown out, right? Like how much for a school teacher, how much for a police officer, how much for a nurse, these kinds of things, right? Different occupations. Just to put in perspective, like what is an affordable for households, right, in terms of housing? We got about the 30% rule, right? That's what's considered to be affordable by policy. So we need all of us to participate, and then Adam is going to provide the draft posters that people can contribute content to. That's where things stand now. So we have a couple of weeks, but not much time, so we gotta get it done. February 26th at 6 p.m. I think it is. Yep, it's a little early, but any comments from anyone from council or?
Appreciate you guys taking all of the work.
Yeah, I don't know, we'll have to see how many people come on a Tuesday night or whatever, right, to talk about this topic, but. So again, Adam can send the link to the posters that people can look at.
And then we're gonna continue meeting. Frankly, this online to keep involvement going, and I know. Since affordability is such a topic. In my office, there'll be other people in my office that will be attending.
So what's the format? Is there gonna be?
So this is gonna be different stations with posters, and then maybe like we're going to check out that room. I've never been in.
It's quick, yeah.
Okay, good.
Is there gonna be a formal presentation that takes place?
We weren't gonna do that, but we can welcome folks, because it's a 2-hour kind of time slot, I imagine people will be coming in at different times, but at the beginning, we sort of.
To get them just to one page, yeah, but I don't think we were gonna, is it drop-in based?
It's drop-in based,
Yeah,
yeah.
so,
And we're in the meeting, those groups discussing, looking to be able to present factual information and then present or provide an opportunity for people to give feedback that's not necessarily having to be a verbal, like, discussion is going to be happening, but we want to document it and not be relying on the planning commissioners and members of MCPC to be trying to remember and recall all of the information that we discussed during the event. And so by having post-its and posters and kind of boards for people to be able to write down their thoughts on the different topics, we can capture the actual responses and feedback and just be there to be able to have constructive conversation or guide maybe the discussion.
sure, or answer questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if people write it down, they can see other people's comments, not just their own, and see that their own comments are being captured.
Well, are there gonna be direct questions that they're gonna be writing?
We'll ask certain questions at each station. For them to write.
That makes the most sense.
Yeah,
just-
otherwise, just
Yeah.
open comment.
Yeah.
So what are those questions gonna be, like, what are? Like, of course, we have a strategy to figure out how to approach this, so like what? You could imagine the stations, what will be there, what we're gonna ask you at each station, how will this be framed? In a way that people just come say like, I like things the way they are, why are you changing them? Like, no, I don't want things that are, no, I don't want things that are bigger, no, I don't want, like. how will we get a more substantive conversation with that?
I think we're gonna have, you know, a map or a series of maps, asking people where they can see or be beneficial. We're also gonna, the reason behind this, we're gonna frame it as to why do we want to see, why would it be beneficial to have additional housing types or have more people in the borough talk about economic benefits, with downtown property, that type of thing.
Well, do you have any ideas, Todd, or questions to ask?
It was a new format this week, so we're still like thinking through what that looks like this summer.
Not to the top of my head,
Well, that's why I asked, because if the goal is for people to come leave more informed to frame up why this discussion is even happening.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the first station
Yeah,
that people visit, is why are we even having this conversation, and then going deeper through the questions or topics might be walking them through the logic sequence before they leave the room. It's kind of easy to walk in and out in a year.
Yeah. It might make sense to do sort of, here's the why, here are the facts, and then here's how this applies specifically to the topics of the zoning.
yes. No,
Changes that are
definitely
being proposed.
Recommend going through the facts first.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So I think we could have
Yes.
greeters and people kind of guiding the direction that people flow through.
I mean. You know, you could try to find a way to connect with people's own concerns and experiences, right? So. I'm not saying to do this and just as an idea, like, could your kids afford to live in America or something? Could you afford to live there? Do you know anyone who can't afford to live here? I mean, when ADUs came up, one of the most interesting tipping points in the conversation was finding people in town who had parents who wanted to live with them. Or like they wanted to convert their garage for their parents and they couldn't do it because we wouldn't allow it. Like when we found those people, it was like gold. It's like real life people with real life parents and they weren't scary, you know, and it made total sense. Yes, Michelle needs a place for her mom to live. Well, why wouldn't we allow Michelle to have a place for her mom to live, right? And so like, you know, finding ways to hook this, but then there's a big leap, and this is always the challenge is how are our policy changes gonna help that? It's like ADUs, it was easy, like, oh, we'll change the rules so you can convert your garage to an apartment. Done. But how is having more housing gonna help? Yeah, so like we have to get people through a set of like thought process, right? Like if you aren't worried about how much you're paying for housing and you're not worried about your kids, so like what, you know, what, how do you get people to the point where they're even gonna like think about it?
So how about a question like this, like, who should be able to afford to live in Narberth?
Right, that could be a good one.
Where should new development occur, if anywhere?
Well, see, that requires a leap, that new development is related to people being able to afford it.
It's true, but, well, I mean, I think there's a nexus, right, with the zoning and development, like,
You just
so,
have to explain it.
yeah, and I mean, I, to be candid, right, it doesn't, there's no, without. Like, just because it's new doesn't mean it's affordable.
Right, that's what people will say.
But anyway, we could also ask, I think we should ask like what people's favorite multifamily building is in Narberth, because I think that sort of calls to the point that, you know, we have a lot of single family houses and twins as well, but that's not the only thing that the borough is defined by for housing. We could ask people what their own thoughts are on strategies we could pursue to make housing more affordable. Like if they have particular, how they think this works, right? And then, you know, that may be also an opportunity to talk about what's realistic and what's unrealistic. That's a strategy. We could ask people what they consider to be affordable, you know, recognizing and then discuss that. The way that's defined normally is that people can afford to spend about 30% of their income on housing, and when they're spending more than that, it means that something else is gonna give.
I think the question should be formed in such a way that they understand why they're being asked. It's like, you know, if there's an historic property that can't be changed, or that it's limited, or if the form zoning code restricts a certain size of addition or something like that, I mean, do you understand the form zoning code and how it restricts what you can or cannot build? I think there's also another question about developers and are we gonna address at all what the limitations are to development based on both the economics of it for the developer? And why maybe we are even considering larger structures in places where maybe they don't think there should be just because they couldn't be built otherwise? Like from a finance and economic standpoint, I mean, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of information, there's gonna be a lot of people who need your reaction against development. But there need to be questions asked so that they understand that, well, you know, given that development won't occur unless it's larger, taller, more compact. You know, it's not just about who can afford to live here. It's also about how you can build something that's affordable.
Yeah, well, I mean, the challenge there, right, is that barring some kind of government involvement, right? We had, what was it, 230 Marion, was it, or what was the house that got moved? And if you think about it, like everything that was done with that project, you know, if on some lots we've built the 3,000 square foot or larger home that's trading at $2 million, right? That's one type of development that's happened several times in Narberth. In that case, the historic property was saved, moved physically, which is expensive. A new twin was built on the house lot that it moved off of, so that's a double house. And then 2 cottages were built on the rear of the lot. So we went from 1 housing unit in a large house to 5 on the same lot. None of the units are affordable.
I was gonna say, yeah, so that's another.
Even no matter what size they are, and that, you know, as someone explained to me, it's like, you know, it's like. There are very few new houses in the borough, and so regardless of their size, they're gonna trade at a very high price per square foot. Because they're a premium product in a premium location, so I think there's some understanding that, like, regardless of form, the underlying economics are not driven by just form, they're driven by a variety of things. And that, you know, smaller houses won't necessarily be a complete solution, or, you know, and so on, and anyway. And just the cost, that, you know, the potential cost of being a homeowner versus renting an apartment, you know, an apartment is a much lower cost option. There's pros and cons, but it does not cost the same amount as owning a house. And this, at least in this neighborhood. And I say that from knowing people that are moving from houses into apartments, because that's what they can afford to do, so. All right, so we'll try to, you can send your questions, we're gonna meet at the end of the week again, right? I know you're gonna code this for now, everything, yeah, okay. Yeah, so then we can circulate draft posters, but like everyone can comment if possible. If nobody comes to the meeting, we can ask each other questions.
Are there, I know it's been advertised, is there any benefit to trying to formalize some of the questions that we'll be asking to put out with the next sort of advertisement? If the goal is to try to encourage more people to come, like, I know that the announcement goes out, but like, is there any benefit to?
Thought provoking, but not.
Yeah, that's just a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, are you concerned about affordability of Narberth? Are you concerned about what types of development might be allowed under the zoning code? You know, are you interested in revitalization of Montgomery Avenue or downtown, there's an open house.
Put a positive spin on it,
Yeah.
not a concern.
Yeah, a positive spin.
Sorry.
And focusing in on just 5B and 4A, so that we're not opening a can.
Eight apartment buildings.
Yeah.
I don't feel that's pushing them.
Have your voice heard.
Yeah, tired of commenting on.
Ask
Yeah, and sometimes I wonder if we should also like, in terms of the zoning codification, if we could. I wish we had moved towards the term flats in some ways instead of apartments, because there is some idea like you can turn an apartment building into condos. Right, and I know that the word condo is kind of dumb too, right, but you can own a multifamily unit. If somebody would sell it. I like the idea of adding the questions, but who's gonna be responsible for doing that? Like, for or.
Yeah, we write the social post and newsletter and everything.
So we formalize the questions and then they could get added to whatever, then like to one of them.
Yeah, we would just need them like Friday by noon at the latest.
Well, I know it's geared more towards housing, but I imagine most of the residents are gonna be asking about the retail and downtown
Yes.
as well, so.
So that's,
can't imagine
that's where we
that-
can connect it a little bit. Say, boroughs to be a certain size, it's smaller now, and, you know, really having the population nearby. To, you know, shops, to my sewer.
Yeah, I have
It's tough to have
like
like data.
it's. Perhaps more than we can cover tonight. Yeah, I know.
Sorry, what time was the meeting? You said this Thursday?
It's 26th.
Oh, sorry, I thought there was.
Oh,
There was meetings
I
separately.
mean, we can invite everybody. but
Outside of meetings, we can only have 3 or 4 people at a time. Because we can't get anywhere near quorum on legally. But we can circulate the materials to everybody. You can contribute. And as long as we meet in small groups, 2 or 3.
Could probably designate a subcommittee to work on this project if you to. You've run it before, you should. So it's administrative.
Is it, so is the subcommittee okay? Is it still limited to 4?
I mean,
I think it is. I think it can't, I don't know.
you're not debating policy, you know, you're
It's true.
debating, you're talking about.
It's just a meeting.
message.
Well, they can't, in other words, you were not allowed to talk about policy.
No, if you have more than a quorum, you could not talk about policy, but you can talk about putting together posters.
So maybe we could have more people invited to that meeting then.
It's fine, you can check with John Walker if you'd like, but, I believe you could probably.
All right, sounds good. We're gonna get our questions heavily.
Sounds good. And a second comment about someone you know moving from a house to an apartment, if they can afford a house, is that real thing?
Yeah, but it's like people also have changing circumstances in their lives.
Right.
And so, you know, that's, is the, you know, sometimes things change and you gotta move. So
And there are any houses, no.
it's actually. It's not thinking about, couldn't even find an apartment in a borough that's affordable. So.
I feel like, I know you want to move on, but wait a, I mean, there's so much here that I think would be to like. Focus on key. Policy questions that council like go back on. And then, because there are really questions you can get input on, so are there key things that council feels it needs to hear about? And then kind of engineer a path of information and questions that are really focused on getting people to those things. I mean, yes, people care about downtown, but honestly, that I don't know. I mean, certain things might wind up being distractions. And I think that personalizing it or using avatars or I remember once I did a wayfinding study in Philadelphia, and the way we told the story of the plan was through kinds of users that are people that like the marketing people wanted to attract, like. So he said, all right, so if you're this person coming, here's your experience. And came to the training, saw this, and it showed all. So like using those kinds of. If there's an analogy for that, this particular process, I think that could really help. Like who could live here? Could a firefighter live here? Could a doctor live here? Could a dentist, could a carpenter live here, whatever.
Here's some with
Could your
daughters.
kids live here, you know? What income does it take to live, you know, those begin. You know, to be good entry points. It depends on having more people in town. Not just our businesses, our churches, our clubs. You know, I mean. So I don't know, trying to. Bring it down to things that people understand and value and bring it to. Examples of things that are relatable. This might be the beginning of that.
To ask who can afford to live in Carver. How much money we have to. Yeah, that's all I was.
Remove here.
If you, right, if you want to locate here, that you're not already here. Yeah. Let's see if you want to change housing minutes here, it change.
Is there an initial list of questions that we'll see?
I'll share. Some questions after our meeting. Well, I think you can set them before, I think that too much, what I'd like to do is, yeah, like go through and I can draft materials like it is starting place. Okay, I can draft this. Okay. Even put together some draft boards. I understand. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right, well, then we'll give the borough the comments right after. So. No objection, we can go on to the next final. Discussion item. Which is the 4A zoning district. And the salient issues, right, are related to potentially increasing the density that's allowed in the 4A zoning district and potentially allowing apartment buildings, for example, which are now in conditional use. And exploring all of the permutations of zoning that drive what you can build. Minimum lot sizes, setbacks, parking requirements, height limits, all these types of technical rules that determine what is possible to build on what is the green on the map, which are the blocks surrounding the downtown. And just as a reminder, like the historic houses are generally protected from demolition without authorization. So that only leaves, in some cases, existing apartment buildings that are not protected. And some. One large vacant lot at the 198 Elmwood Avenue, which is the large vacant lot in the entire green zone district. And so I think Todd actually maybe had prepared some potential suggestions related to potential revisions to this zoning district on this topic.
Yeah, right after I got back from the chiropractor, because my arm was really twisted. I have.
I'm just doing my job.
Yes.
Move this along.
I believe I said in the last meeting, you do a very good job. So I made, I'll hand this out. I think there's one for you guys too. Possible modifications to consider. If you can pass one down the thread and bring home the other thing. If not, I've got one more. You want one? See if there's okay. So I can read.
Hopefully it won't bear when it's not shared. Sorry, Ralph. Next month. Actually, I can, you know what, should I share it on the screen or?
Yeah, you have it, don't you? You share it on the
I,
site.
I may.
I mean, I can call it and share it, because I'm,
So let me, let's just share.
Or I could just read someone's lips.
so I'm gonna, like, you let me share my screen. Am I still on the screen? I don't think I am.
I just allowed someone to share. Adam, is that you?
I did ask to share and then, but I want to take that back for a second. I didn't have the right window open. Oh, okay, sure.
Right, so Adam's request. I put a little more structure around. Things that we could consider. Adjusting in the 4A district, and there's really two goals. One of which is there are a couple of major sites in the 4A district. There's a 198 Onward. You could say, I don't know what we will receive for the Citizens Bank, but the parking lot behind Citizens Bank. In theory, one day the SEPTA parking lot is another large site with development potential. So one goal is to unlock potential for those sites. For housing development. Second goal is more incremental, which is to explore opportunities for smaller scale infill development of properties in the 4A district that are not contributing resources to the historic district, or in some cases, they are contributing resources, but they can be adapted without demolition. So, for example, a multifamily house. Say 3 units could have 4 units or something like that. Anyway, so one scenario is larger scale sites, and that's related more towards apartment buildings. And the second scenario is smaller scale info. So in terms of the apartment buildings. I went through the minutes of the last few planning commission meetings to make sure I kind of captured all of the recommendations we've discussed and agreed to. And looked up the sections of the code that pertain to those topics and just sort of wrote a slightly more structured recommendation. For example, things that have been flagged, particularly in regard to our analysis of 198 Onward, are front and side setbacks. It's a corner lot, it actually has 2 front setbacks, which is a quirky situation. So there are proposals about how to modify the setback requirements to provide a larger floor plate. There's also suggestions about the building coverage is kind of, to me, is a little surprisingly low in that district. To accommodate apartment buildings, you might want to consider raising the building coverage slightly and the impervious coverage slightly. Now, one of the things we can do in our code, one of the things that concerns me is making changes to the code in the zoning district that apply to everything. But one of the things we can do is make changes that only apply to a building type, like to apartment buildings. So we could make a set of rules that apply only to apartment buildings. So if you're doing an apartment building, you have certain dimensional requirements, but if you're building a house, you have other dimensional requirements. That feels to me a lot more contextual. And furthermore, we could also, right now, the minimum lot size for an apartment building in this district, I think, is 8,000 square feet. So we can calibrate that to the sites that we know are available, which means no one's going to be building an apartment building at 2,000 square foot lot or something like that. So this gives me much more comfort knowing that these changes, which actually allow for bigger, bulkier, denser buildings, are really restricted because of the way they're related to a building type, to a lot size. So to me, that is super contextual. Anyway, so height, another thing, that the planning commission has flagged is there are two issues with height. One is the way it's measured, and the other is the absolute value of the height. What I'm suggesting here is the height could be modified by measuring the height. Two options are from the ground level of the front entrance. So wherever the main front door is, that's where you measure the building height. Or you take the average elevation of the ground level along with primary and secondary frontages, the street frontages. Right now, we measure building height from all four sides of the building, but it may be more reasonable just to take the front and the side, because that's what faces the public well. So those are two possibilities, and I think that will tend to, particularly in places where the entrance will be on the higher ground, that will help may be advantageous to people who like want to put a building with parking tucked under it. And then for apartment buildings, again, in these particular situations, it feels to me like 4 stories would be appropriate. It could be possible to consider a fourth floor setback, but I'm not sure that could be something. Parking, this just identifies the code provisions that relate to things we've already discussed about parking ratios and parking requirements. Similar with driveways, we've already discussed a couple of recommendations with driveways. And so I've reflected code provisions there that we need to be amended. I did find a code provision to two-way driveways that might be a good language to use in this case. It doesn't only allow two-way driveways, which is I think one of the planning commission's recommendation, but also requires that a pedestrian crosswalk be established where the driveway crosses the sidewalk. Small thing, but there you go. So that language is elsewhere. So anyway, this I think captures the major, I think according to our minutes, I think this captures the things we talked about. Site planning, height, parking, driveways, and identifies the sections in the code that would need to be amended. So we could check the baseline and see what a reasonable amendment would be if we want to allow for apartments in these particular sites. In terms of the infill, there are a couple goals here. One is to allow cottages, row houses, and twins as of right in the 4A. To encourage more multifamily houses, which is a special building type, and which is looks like a detached house but has several units in it. And to I think to allow second units, ADUs in all housing types, and to allow third units in in-house housing types that are 3 stories in all of them. Allow third units in 3-story housing types. So for example, if you had a row house, right now you can only have 1 unit in a row house. The line above says allow a second unit in all housing types. We allow second units in some housing types like detached houses. And twins, twins, but not row houses. We can also then allow a third unit if it's a 3-story building. So you like a row house can be like a triple deck. A multi-family house can already have 3 stacked units, but a row house.
Why can't a twin then?
I just don't remember what the code says. I think that it says allow third units in 3-story housing types. So any housing type that is 3-story can have 3 units. That's 3 stories.
Well, what if another way of doing this is not to break the flow here, but it's just to say that multi-family house can be a twin or a row house. It's just more than 1 unit.
There's a lot of different dimensional requirements, particularly with twins and row houses that a multifamily house doesn't have. Multifamily house has setbacks on both sides. The twin doesn't have a setback on one side, and a row house.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, I live on Elmwood and the exact same house that I'm in, but actually smaller, but the same house, well, it's a little smaller because mine has condition. I live in a single twin,
the same house up the street has been put into 3 apartments, or at one point it was 3 apartments. Just the outsides, it may actually have a second entrance for one of those apartments, but which is kind of, I think, one of the issues with multifamily type.
You have a twin with 3 units in it?
Yeah,
On your block, I don't think that's legal.
well,
It's existing.
that's not what I asked.
Yeah. Well, what I'm
And
saying
that's
is allow
3D,
30 units in 3-story housing. So if you have a house which like a twin or a row house, and it has 3 stories, we should allow 3 units.
But I mean, on Elmwood in the 4A district, we have these apartment units. I just don't understand why it has to be 3 stories. You could fit 3.
Because you can have 3 in a multifamily house now, however you want to configure it.
Right, but
I
can't
don't
we,
want to argue about
Well,
this right now. Can I get to the rest of the list? This is like a super fun point. Okay.
Alright.
If you want to argue about it, I'm just gonna go home. It's like such a little, no.
don't, that's not fair, Todd, that's not fair, this is a
Can I
discussion of
just
zoning.
get, can I just get through it?
Okay,
Then site planning recommendations are for detached houses, cottages, row houses and twins, eliminate minimum lot widths altogether. As long as side setbacks are maintained, I really don't think we care how wide a house is, as long as it has setbacks. Or how wide a lot is, let the people who are building houses figure that out. For lot widths in the 4A district, I think a multifamily house is either 50 or 60 feet. But I think that could be reduced somewhat to 40 feet. So you have more potential lots for multifamily houses. For lot sizes, for detached houses, cottages, row houses, twins, and multifamily houses, I think we can probably just align the minimum lot size with what's in the 4B district. It's not that much different, but it is different. It feels to me like that would be the next logical thing to do, is just sort of, make those lot sizes. The minimum lot size smaller, but consistent with 4B. Building coverage, increased building coverage, slightly, increase impervious coverage, slightly. Building width. One thing we could consider is maximum building width to encourage smaller structures. I had an ongoing conversation with the solicitor for a while, but we never resolved it, is whether you could have a maximum lot size. Which would mean that if like people were subdividing, they couldn't create a huge lot, have a huge house, but it may be like if we want to encourage smaller structures, then we might have maximums rather than minimums, so that people can only build things of a certain size. And we'd have to check and see if
You
that's,
mean height?
well, building width for one thing would be one of the things. Could be a maximum lot size, could be a maximum building width. And then frontage line, actually in 4A, the frontage line is 25 feet. So I already suggested above, for apartment buildings, that the front setbacks be changed. They could also be changed for other housing types, for cottages, for detached houses, cottages, row houses and twins, from 25 to say 20 feet or 15 feet, whatever, 20. Which I think is pretty not inconsistent with the deal of 4A district, but it does allow a little more area of the lot to be built on. And then some of the same parking requirements, changes, so reducing or waiving parking requirements for units under 750 square feet. But a new proposal reduced the multi-family house parking ratio to 0.7 spaces per unit, just as we are proposing to reduce the parking ratio for apartment buildings. So those are all little tweaks. I don't know where the tipping point is on any of these but they're all listed there with the reference to the existing zoning code and where you can find them. And the reason is I think because if you wanna put 3 units in the way that you have them in the, those houses on Elmwood, that will be just a multi-family house, so you can just do that. The only place for that is, it's quirky as with twins, and I guess we'd have to think through, because twins have a party wall, whether that makes a difference or not, to have. Like the front back twins and then one above or something like that. So that's the only condition that might require a little discussion, but I think most configurations of 3 units in a building could be considered. A multi-family house. Anyway, so those are 2 sets of changes, and again, the infill ones would only occur in places where you don't have a contributing resource, and so you could build something new, or with this contributing resource like a multi-family house that can be adapted for more units.
Okay, so I know that was a lot, but again, some of us just rehashing things we've already discussed, so. What do people think about this? All right, I'm gonna go through then item by item. So the overall concept is that we can adjust the metrics in the zoning based on the type of building that you're building.
Right.
Which seems logical. And that also what you can build is determined in part by how large the lot is. So I think that we should have some room for a discussion about what the numbers are. But does anyone see a problem with those 2 strategic concepts?
In practice, where would the, I guess, 8,000 plus lot size be other than?
Yeah, see, I have a question about 4A being a limiting factor. Examples you gave, I believe. Last meeting, or the one before, was showing apartment buildings in other districts that fill up the lot, apartment buildings that fill up the lots. And I just wonder why we're limiting this to 4A.
Well, I think that part of this discussion is that we're just going zone by zone.
Yeah, I know, I mean, but
And that's really just so that we can move through them. So we can move down to 3 next.
I mean, I think that would be a good question, though, is like, why wouldn't this apply to 3B? Or 3C? Where there's already apartment buildings that exist.
So why don't we spend one moment on that, but consider whether we wanna just keep it to 4A for now, just again, in the sake of trying to get through a recommendation. But what we may have discussed last time, you may be referring to is the metropolitan apartment building, which actually is in 2 zoning districts, 3A and 3B.
What the zoning map?
Yeah. I have the zoning map too,
yeah.
but I can only look at one thing at a time.
Yeah. Well,
So the Essex is 3A. The orange, let's see, it's that 3A?
well, light orange is a 3B, and the orange is 3B everywhere.
Yellow is C and orange.
3B and then 3A is the red.
Yeah, so Essex is 3C and orange is 3B. So this apartment building is in 2 zoning districts on the map. I forget if either one of them includes apartment buildings as a allowed use. It's a condition. It is a conditional use.
Which makes sense, to be
3A, 3A.
traditional.
Yeah, but so it is a 3A.
I'm in Georgia.
But and to the point about setbacks, it does have a 20-foot plus setback, maybe 25-foot front setback. Side setbacks are probably only 7 feet or so. It's a through lot parcel, through block parcel, so it sort of has two frontages, one's front, one's back. It's 2 lots, and so actually the way it was probably built and permitted the center courtyard might be the side setback, the 2 buildings put together. It's only about 20 feet wide. And it's dozens and dozens of apartment built units with not very much parking.
But it's also only 3 stories,
It's about 35 feet high.
which has always been the height limit.
Yeah, it's about 35 feet high, which is the current height limit of 4A. I think, it's not a particularly sloping site, but it's about 35 feet high. Yeah, it may have basement apartments, so it may actually have 4 occupied floors. Because
Right.
it's a garden level.
Yes, that's true.
35-foot building envelope, and then, yeah, so that, and it's not in 4A, and the other thing is, it's in the middle of, you can see, this is another, I think, a multifamily housing unit, it looks like.
Mhm.
So we have this context of singles and twins. Essex has slightly larger houses and Dudley has slightly smaller houses. But we have this tradition of having multifamily on the same block face, mid-block as apartments. In this case, more or less reflecting the house line, which is not consistent, not perfectly consistent, but is a relatively uniform 25-ish feet, 20 feet.
So I'm gonna retract my question about why aren't we talking about other zones, because I think you're right, I think 4A is different. In allowing taller buildings. Perhaps.
Well, but I think the other key thing about it is in some ways that the building out the parcel is a way to get more units without going up, right? But there's no, like that building has very little. It's probably more than 50% of the lot, it's probably like 60 or 70% lot coverage. It's getting there.
But it is lower, so it doesn't
35
feel as overwhelming.
Yeah, it blends in, right? And that's why I can show you this review, it's just similar. And that's where the question of like, will development overwhelm the context is often an architectural question. It's not. So anyway, we might want to think about the other zoning districts. I think I got bumped out of the meeting, sorry.
Yeah, you're not in it anymore.
Probably my fault. So I think the idea is that we would allow different setbacks for apartment buildings.
So I just wanna say, I mean, I spoke about this last time, I do think front setbacks are important to maintain. Whatever the setback is on the street, that's been something that's been ongoing. And that they shouldn't be allowed to be closer to the sidewalk.
Well, I'd like to push back because I think that the practical aspect of small lots and large front setbacks is you can't build anything on the lot. And I know that in some cases we have irregular parcels and we can say that people with irregular parcels might seek relief, exemptions, what do you call it, variances. But that's creating more regulatory administrative burden on development and making it less likely that you can actually build anything. Just if I don't get back into the game. And so in other words, when you look around the borough, as we discussed last time, we have a number of buildings built not 25 feet from the street. And they're often the institutional buildings, the larger ones, and. We might say that's because they're institutional, it's also because they have architectural presence. But the reason why the architects did it, right, is in part because that's the only way they could fit the thing on the parcel. So, and it looks fine, the way it is, but. I have a site, I just can't get back into it right now.
So you sent an email out earlier this month, January, of Ridge Avenue
That's
in
a
Roxborough.
corridor.
And I didn't say anything at the time, but I felt that was a way overscale building.
Have you been there?
Yeah.
Ridge Avenue?
Oh, yeah.
You think it's too big, because it's not any bigger than the building across the street?
Yeah, but you know what? It doesn't, first of all, it's not of materials that are as appealing up close to the sidewalk like that. I mean, it's basic, a lot of buildings are built with just big glass windows and not particularly interesting aesthetically. Finishes. And I just feel like when you open up those floodgates, you're gonna get a lot of these sort of very typically constructed. Not always, the best materials. So my reaction to the photos was that building was too big, it was too banal, it was just not it wasn't a great building. And it was very tall. And when you go down Ridge Avenue, the hospital is there, even that doesn't feel as big as that for some reason, I don't know why. But maybe it's not, maybe it's only 3 stories. But that building looked really big and imposing, and I don't think that's what we want.
All right, well, let's come back to Narberth from Roxborough for a second. So we come back to that in just a minute, just so we can go through the things that Todd outlined, and then maybe get to where the challenges might be, or the problems. Because I guess what Todd is outlining is, I'll bring up the 190 Elmwood as a hypothetical lot, okay? Just sort of try to bring this to what is next on.
Yeah, you're in and I made you a co-host, so you don't have to request to share.
If any idea why you're looking.
Which idea? Go ahead, yeah.
The setback. So Heidi, it is taking a while to convert me to the notion that the setbacks may not have to be as steep, but I've been converted to the notion. And I think it's because the buildings that would be built this way would be something of many of them are quarters, and so they would be sort of prominent featured buildings, and would be able to by breaking the rule, they actually create more of a kind of holding the corner kind of situation. I mean, I desperately wish we could have better control over the architecture, even looking at those Ridge Avenue buildings. But gee, one just looks just like those buildings in Haverford. Same architect, who knows? But I think that they become like accents on the corner, like the churches have been in certain situations, and it's I think that coming closer to the corner actually makes them stronger and makes the corner stronger. I mean, And I think that it actually helps the mid blocks, which have the deeper setbacks. To even feel more distinct because they're kind of set apart from the apartments. I think the bigger buildings can manage that. Like, actually, what would bother me is if a house came along in the middle of the block and all of a sudden punched 15 feet. That would be a big mistake. But I think at the corners, these bigger buildings, they're different type, they stand out. They're meant to be features in our town. As you drive around the blocks, you see certain buildings that stand out a little bit more. And I think that's what these buildings can be.
I think, I appreciate what you're saying. But I would like to see an example in Margaret where there's one that's closer. I mean, you said civic buildings, like which ones?
We looked last time at the, I can pull up like the Presbyterian Church, but which has I think a small school, maybe you're originally part of it.
That's setback.
Only on one side, that's what, these corner lots, like if you set back from both facades, you won't have a lot left. And that's where the other, just, I know it's not 4A, but in terms of like architecture, the Elm is the largest building in town. It's very small setbacks and
Well, actually, it's setback also
not very far,
on Windsor.
but not very far. I don't think it's set back 25 feet. I could be wrong about that though. And what's that? I will show you, so while before I leave this parcel, since I have it on the screen, I'll show you too, like I drew in the setbacks that Todd was proposing, I think. There's my layers palette here. So like, these are examples of 10 and 15 feet. Right? And so the rear minimum setback in this zone is 15 feet. Now, I don't agree with this setback, just for the record, but we have to seek a consensus and a harmony. You can see the next lot over it looks like a detached garage, hard up against the corner of the lot. That's the traditional place to put your garage in Narberth, not 15 feet off the lot line.
Oh,
Right.
in the back,
In the back, you like
Yeah.
shove it up against the rear.
right.
There's examples of party wall garages where the two lots have a party wall garage. That's very, very common. So I don't think that these zoning prescriptions actually reflect maybe the way the town was traditionally built, but can we live with a 15-foot rear setback? Probably, especially for like a larger building or a new building. And then the pink is a 10-foot setback from the parcel line, again, which is just the way the parcel line is. As my concept was that you have to continue the house line for, some distance, call it 15 or 25 feet. Then to Todd's point about single family homes, if you build a single house, because you're continuing the house line, you can't be proud of that line. But if you have an entire large lot, you can establish a new context with your architecture because you have enough canvas to work with. I was going to add a suggestion to all of the restrictions that Todd put in. I generally think we should be relaxing some of the rules, but where we could deal with the architecture would be, I thought somewhere else in the zoning code it said that we have how large a surface plane on a building can be. And if that's not in our code, it's in other codes. So sometimes talk about how long the facade is, but how long the facade is doesn't really get at the architecture either. It's just a facade length. So we could say that, each plane of the facade can only be so many square feet, and that forces some articulation and breaking up of the mass, right? Setbacks, a little bit of architectural,
Which we have now.
yeah, so if we say that's how we deal with a large building, can't have a facade plane over a certain size. And that will give us some of those bays and rhythm of a classical building, or at least it gets towards that, to break up the massing. But you can see if we build along the yellow line, we're not violating any of the views on any block. And I think that's what is typical with these corner lots and these larger parcels. I think we should set that apartment buildings, I think, should be allowed on smaller parcels, it's just you're not gonna get as many units. I don't know that anyone's gonna build one. But it should, like, why, if you wanna build a 4 unit or 5 unit apartment building on a small lot, I mean, we call them multifamily houses, but. There are in this borough examples of very small apartment buildings, as there are in other places. And they wouldn't be mistaken as a house, they're just very small apartments. And on this same Elmwood block, you can see these are, I think, essentially apartment buildings. And they were recently doubled in size or whatever, by putting these rear wings on. But they're sort of designed, if you will, as twins. But they're not twins, they're multifamily housing. And the owner of these actually came to our meeting. And he was, if I recall correctly, he was not in favor of building apartment buildings. But these are in fact apartment buildings on that same block base. So that's why I think Todd's proposal is actually a pretty reasonable compromise. It's just that, again, if you only can build on 50% of the lot, you actually can build a surprisingly small building. And we don't actually have very much land to build on. And so it gets to the question of, is it better to build one building with 30 or 40 units? Because we're only gonna build 3 buildings total. Or, if we build it with only, or basically 3 houses, if we only get 3 houses, we're gonna get 2 or 3 houses on this lot.
So all I'm saying is that I'm in agreement with everything that's been presented, except for front yard setbacks. And I'm just curious what anyone else thinks. I mean, I don't wanna I'm speaking for myself. Everything else looks absolutely fine to me for 4A.
Let's just go around the table then and respond to Heidi's question. Jennifer, you go first.
I mean, I think for me, I largely agree with the proposed. I do think it in some ways changes the context a little bit, but I don't think that the changes in a negative way. I think it increases the opportunities for what can get put on a site.
I agree. I think the uniqueness of the property that we're discussing as well lends itself to the smaller frontages. So yeah, I agree with this.
I was trying to get an understanding, a sense of how many sites we're actually talking about. Is it mostly just this one on L?
The notes I prepared are meant to address 3 possible sites in the 4A district. The lot behind Citizens Bank. If there are other plans for it, I don't know. And if the SEPTA lot ever becomes a developable parcel.
Okay.
Those are the 3 main.
The stuff to lot 4A,
That's
that's
fine,
actually fine.
That's fine, okay, so take that out. Then possibly. Though Adam pointed out to me one day that there's an apartment building on the corner of Essex and Windsor. It's like a 2-story building right now. That's in the 4A also. It's not a contributing resource. I think. No, it's the northeast corner of Essex and Windsor. It's Eli used to own that.
Oh, the Essex Manor,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is a possible. If it's not a contributing resource, that is a possible site where there's maybe more economic potential than there is right now.
It's the properties that are not historic would include Essex Manor, which is, I guess, 4A, yeah, and there's an apartment building at Windsor and Dudley. There's an apartment building that's not historic on Haverford, Hamden Manor. which is also 4A.
In all those places, it would be different, but I don't think it would be bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're very unlikely to, but one way to think about like redevelopment is like, if a disaster were to befall us, could we rebuild and what would we rebuild? So those parcels would be rebuilt under the new rules.
Yeah, and that's why I was trying to get a sense of the scale, really, what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you could assemble the rest of this block, again, no one's going to do that, but. If you did, you could build one, consolidating the parcels. The only vacant land is literally this one
Yeah.
site.
So, I mean, I'm generally in agreement, with the proposal, I would say on the frontage. This is just my personal view, but if you zoomed in on Homewood. Right where the corner where that last house is. If you almost kept the frontage from. What's that, east-west, just going your view down the street, so you could chop that little triangle and. Shape it off, it's very specific, but I don't have an issue otherwise with the frontages being kind of wrapped around that corner, if that makes sense. From the 10 feet. And I do think, the elm going down Windsor is closer to 20 feet, probably 25 feet, so. I don't conceptually have a problem, but that top left corner is that's all. But I don't think it's enough to move. Make it less about it, but just the view coming down the street, if you're walking, right?
Right, but like in reality, you probably would go the building no closer to the street than this house. I mean,
Yeah, that's.
Possibly even further back, depending on
Yeah.
where it starts.
So. Yeah, I thought it looked strange, you had the apartment jutting out. Kind of that top left, so. But I think if it's this side and maybe 2 or 3 other ones, I don't have a problem with it. Frontages.
David, Ralph, you're on the phone.
Yeah. I mean, my take on it is that I like the idea of using smaller setbacks as an incentive to build more density. I wouldn't promote it if you're just going to put more houses on there of types that are the ones that we've been seeing built in the borough in the last few years. So as an incentive, I like the idea, and that's kind of my take on it.
So Ralph, the proposal, there's a lot of detail, but the proposal I made is that these rules would only apply to apartment buildings.
Right.
So you wouldn't get those incentives either for setbacks or lot coverage or anything if you just wanted to build a single family house or anything like that.
Right. So, developing this as an incentive to build density seems like a good idea. Promoting that.
David,
Yeah, I generally agree with the proposal as well. I think, yeah, you're kind of maximizing what we can do on some of these few lots that we have left is ideal. I think we also mentioned, like, just kind of speaking of the house line, just the road, this is very, very nitpicky, but the road, Elmwood, the way it kind of slants it, does that sort of negate the need to keep it that you're sort of already breaking away from the house line there on the adjacent properties there.
yeah, in other words. Yeah. You're unlikely to notice, to be honest, on this particular one, because there's no, you're not, to Todd's point, you're not violating the line of houses because the street itself doesn't have a house line. The house line can't continue around the corner. And then, we're sending the grade to cross the bridge, so this is a civic gateway, if you will, to downtown. We have apartment buildings across the street, albeit with a front yard setback. So this is it feels very much like an English village. you know, and. So the, you know, the setbacks won't be the issue, it's gonna be the architectural finish that sort of defines. How it looks, and then it faces over the railroad, so you're not even, no one even has to look at it, the building, there's no neighbors across the street to look at it. So,
So let me ask a question. So I'm looking at the apartment building that's in the, I think it's 4A, and it's next to the, it's on Haverford. It's just as you go up the street from Narberth Avenue, keep going east.
that's out of our borough, but yeah.
I'm just looking at it for scale. So how about if we could allow a closer setback if there's a requirement for some green or open space? In other words, like that apartment building that you showed earlier, it's got the two arms that come out and a courtyard in between. I mean, that provides some relief, so it's not just like a straight shot building. And just to say you have to break it up every 20 feet, 30 feet or whatever with an indent, that can be done with, 10 inches or a foot. But to really provide a green space,
It actually has to be done at 8 feet,
To count as a,
so every indent has to be 8 feet.
yeah,
but 8 feet's not very much either. I mean, I'm looking at that apartment building that's going, as I described up from Haverford, and it's got some nice cutouts with trees and things growing and some relief.
But-
And it's also not it's only 3 stories, so that makes a big difference too.
well, I think too, there's a question what 4A wants to be versus 3A, 3B, then that's where. 4A is essentially just the parcels that abut the 5A district, which is the downtown district, which includes, properties like the Elm, right, with no setbacks in some cases. But 5A is intended to be this mixed use district, and one of the criticisms we've heard about the Elm is that there isn't any commercial in it. And there should, maybe there should.
Should have been, but that isn't 4A then. So
It's 5A, right, so the 4A is but 4A is like the other side of the street from the Elm, and so that's where. Maybe the greensward aesthetic is appropriate for areas further from downtown. But
correct.
it's not that there wouldn't be any green, but it's just reduced, and this is the Presbyterian Church, by the way, that one facade of the church is essentially 10 feet off the lot line. And then it's the front of the church is more than 10 feet from the lot line.
But it has a percentage of green area, and all I'm saying is maybe it could be done as a percentage of green area. You could have a 10-foot setback as long as you have a percentage of green area along the street. I just hate to see a massive wall 10 feet from.
Yeah, so I think that let's come back to the massive wall part, because again, you're really speaking to sort of the aesthetic, the architecture.
I am.
As opposed to the setback, and so I guess the question is, right, is it the setback feels like, I'm afraid of ugly buildings, and so I'm gonna try to put them as far from the street as I can.
Well, no.
So in order to get, like, some
Soften
landscape
it.
or-
All I'm
Yeah,
asking is for it to have something written in the code that softens that facade. Whether it's set back or whether there's some green space incorporated into an undulated facade or something that makes it a more designed. Element of green or undulation or something.
And that was gonna be my suggestion too, was that we need to break up the bulk of larger buildings. And then to Heidi's point, it's like, I had assumed that we would set back 8 feet, and but those notches could be balconies, but
They could be anything.
that also creates a modulation between the building and the street to have a terrace, so. If there's ground floor terraces, people can have container gardens or not, but.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, I don't wanna like I don't wanna do a lot of talking either, and I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to say. I pretty much believe the same things, but I also sort of think that this particular part of the borough, the context, if you look at as you cross this bridge, I know it's not 4A, it's not Elmwood Avenue. But the Little Gym building and the shops, you know, the ballet studio, those are zero lot line buildings. They're built on the sidewalk edge.
As they should be, because they're downtown.
Right, but they're 100 feet from this parcel, and so that's where this idea of transitioning from larger lots or larger front yards and single family homes in some cases to the village center, which is where Elmwood and the train station are fundamentally very close to the village center. And in some ways standing up to the railroad too, which is the presence. So, okay, well, so any further, just, I mean, so we have a vote to say that it seems like the majority of the commission is more or less okay with the setbacks that's Todd's proposing, with the exception of Heidi's concern of how do we avoid having how would you phrase it exactly?
A continuous wall.
And do you think that can be solved with modulation of the
Oh,
wall?
absolutely. Yeah. But I think it needs to be presented in order to be justifiable in the code, it needs to be presented as a percentage of open space or landscape, or however you want to word it.
And so Todd, I mean, maybe this is about like how we just, that setback might have to, there's a setback, but you might have to set back more for portions of the facade to break up the wall if it's more than a certain length or a certain area.
Yeah, and that's already in the code.
So,
I do want to clarify one thing. When I read 10 feet, I meant 10 feet off the sidewalk. Is that how you do it?
that I drew it 10 feet off the lot line because that's how it's regulated.
Where would the lot line be? Would it be the curb?
The lot line is wherever the lot line is. And this is not this drawing is not necessarily the legal survey. We have that from the previous development proposal. But from looking at that, it seems the county's parcels looked like they weren't. They might be relatively accurate. So I think they're gonna have to shade the lot to, I don't know, there was
I mean, if it turns that drawing, that would be 10 feet or more off the sidewalk. Would you agree with that?
the pink is off of the 10 feet off the lot line. And it might, I do think we're not forcing you to be 10 feet off the lot line, right? It's just a minimum setback.
Right. I think 10 feet from the sidewalk would be the afraid about it creating. But it's a lot line with a curve, and then you have a sidewalk. And the building will literally be 3 feet from the sidewalk.
Well, we can see if that's a regular or standard, be confused.
Or just, yeah. But anyway. Just wanted to clarify that. And how long, that long trapezoidal side, Adam, how long would that be? Do you have a measurement for that?
How long is which side?
The longest trapezoidal side?
Is on Elmwood?
Yes.
How long is the parcel?
Well, that yellow line, how long would that be?
Which, the setback line?
Yeah, this line, that's what that is, the yellow line.
It's about 160 feet.
Okay, so it would have 3 of those wells, 2 or 3 of those wells.
It might be 1 or 2. In other words, it depends on how it would be like a center well.
You can't have more than 42 linear feet of frontage, and then you have to have a 16-foot break, so that's a 58-foot.
Okay,
So-
if you want to have 16-foot breaks between 3 bays, then that'd be one way to do it.
Yeah.
Because the alternative would be to have 3 bays, maybe a little more than 42 feet, but the center bay would be larger, so.
So there'd be quite a number of bays if they build that whole wall. Maybe they would.
And then just to clarify, the current height limit is 35 feet, not 45 feet, so. Change 5. You don't have to 45. we had talked about 35, which if we go to 45, it was on the density bonus model.
And then if you measure the height from either the entrance, which is likely to be in the middle of Elmwood or near the corner, or from the Elmwood and Margaret side to the lot, that means you have an easy ability to tuck something underneath.
And but if, right, if you, like, if we started to say we're gonna measure it like we used to along the building line, not along the perimeter of the lot, because that's part of the issue, right? Because especially, like you said, this back of the lot is the lowest point, and that's the part you don't even want to build on. So we would be measuring on the building line, which is somewhere near this yellow line, maybe a little further back, right? It does drop 10 or 11 feet from end to end, and then it drops probably 7 feet this way. So you would say, you know, the average height that you can build is under the current zoning is more like 28 to 30 feet. It's like right around 30 feet, right? And the height limit is 35 feet, but the average height of the building is gonna only give you 30 feet at the corner, maybe less. And so that's where, you know, even if we were to say 40 feet and 3 stories, or I was thinking, you know, could we basically give you, say, if your lot line falls by 10 feet, you may deduct 5 feet from the height limit, like, or, you know, or add 5 feet to the height limit. As, because your lot is, it's just basically saying that your baseline is gonna be lower. You know what I mean? Because you see, as a matter of development, we could actually, you know, you could mound dirt around the building and put green in front of it, right? But that we're measuring it from before you build the building.
Right.
That would be hiding that parking, but so.
I think either, right now it measures all 4 sides. That's the calculation is based on all 4 sides. If you just took the 2 sides that face the street, that changes the map a lot because you're cutting out all the back, right? And it is a lot more rational because, you know, not rational, but the justification is that the street side is what most people see, and so the height's related to the street. Right, so that already is a difference compared to what we allow as advantageous here. The other thing, I think this that's too complicated. If that doesn't work, then taking the measurement from where the front entrance is, I think would solve problems too. Like wherever you put your front entrance, that's where you measure the building height from. I think both of those result in an outcome that's sort of related to the form and use of the building, but also allows the possibility of tucking parking underneath. I mean, no one's ever going to build the entrance on the lowest part of the lot because then they'd have to excavate the back of the lot to put the building in, right?
Well, if they do, they just measure from that door. I mean, that's the 2 points.
So anyway, those are the 2 standards I think are easy and make sense. One or the other.
All right, is there, I mean, what would be the best way to bring this issue to a close, at least for this evening? Like, we need to go around and ask people if they have any changes to Todd's recommendations? And if they don't have any changes, if they would endorse them as is? All right, let's do that, Jennifer.
I think my only comment was, the height limit at the original conversation as you brought up had been 3 stories, 35 feet, but then a 4th floor for a bonus. And I do like the idea of maintaining that bonus for affordability or green building standards. So you can still get the 4th floor, but we're getting something else.
Building height from the frontage makes a lot of sense. The building width maximum. I'm not sure that's the best approach. I understand what the goal is with that, but wouldn't that limit certain buildings that we're trying to encourage?
It would only be for, it wouldn't be for apartment buildings. It would just be for houses, twins, cottages. Or row houses, not for apartment buildings, so we can. Have different rules for different kinds of buildings.
Which, yeah, makes sense. Okay.
So the idea is that, for apartment buildings. There are a set of changes that are a little more aggressive, and then for. The other common types, like. The detached house, the twin, the row house, the cottage. There are some little tweaks to that. And then multifamily house, there's some additional tweaks, but those are mostly consistent with what we have in the 4B zones, which is like the next zone. In fact, we don't allow all those housing types in the 4A right now. I don't think we allow, I know we don't allow cottages, or and I don't think we allow some of the others, so it's also allowing more housing types in that district. Don't allow there already.
That makes sense. Everything else is, well, I think it accomplishes what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think I'm generally okay with it, just clarity, so somebody can't go and assemble a bunch of lots and then consolidate them and then use this, could they?
They could, yes,
They
but they
could.
would, but you know, it's logistically, yes, you could.
But if they were contributing resources, they couldn't share them.
Okay,
Without permission.
so that would cover it, okay. Yeah, then I'm generally fine with it with good Jennifer's statement on the height. 35 with a bonus to the two. Purple, et cetera. Fourth story.
Okay, I concur mostly with what was said, including the height being 35 plus 10 for affordable units. I also, though, I would ask that we should consider the building coverage ratio and whether, like, I know it may seem like I'm pushing density or too much urbanism, but I think what I'm really pushing is just responding to the way that we build buildings in the borough historically and what is practical. Should it be a little bit higher even than 50% based on case studies of other buildings and what might be possible? And then again, tying both impervious and building coverage maybe to the green building standard is a way to mitigate stormwater, or just make sure that, you can cover more of your lot, but you need to address the stormwater management issues, which is one of the main problems with building more density. And then, the only other, I think the main get here is the apartment building type as we've discussed. I just personally don't think zoning should block smaller projects if somebody wants to do a small project. So I kind of think apartment buildings should be allowed on smaller lots down to even 3,000 square feet or something, because it would be a small apartment building. And you heard me talk about, like, if you can fit more units in a twin or as well, like, why not, right? Like I think the concern was about, like, whether that would lead to degradation of the housing stock and other concerns about, renting out the houses, and those are valid discussion points, but I think that today we have examples where that is being done successfully, so.
We do allow multifamily houses, which are up to 5 units, and so you do have the functional choice to build a multifamily structure. That's not a permanent in these smaller lots in this district. And in fact, you also have the ability to convert a house into a multifamily too. So
Part of this is my personal lived story, so like we have a council member that is interested in promoting ownership, right? As my first housing unit that I ever purchased out of college was in a converted 4-unit apartment building. It's technically 5 units because the caretaker unit was the garden level that they actually added to. So there were 5 condo owners in a 1920 building. We have a very similar building in this borough, actually to that format. It's not a multifamily house, but it was a condo and it was what I could afford and I loved it. It was beautiful architecture, it was great. And so, not a great investment, but it was affordable and it was for purchase. And so, and architecturally, the facade was beautiful, the rest of it was a shoebox. So all I'm getting at is I just kind of think that there might be a way to do it with an attached form, whether that's a row house, like you're saying 3 stories, 3 units, which, you know, a twin, just one party wall. And having a small apartment building, I don't think anyone's gonna build one today, a small condo, but there are examples in the borough of small condo developments and, you know, why rule it out with something is all my.
Difference between that, I don't get the difference between that and what we allow as a multi-family house.
I think doesn't the multifamily house only have 1 front door?
It has to have 1 entrance.
Yeah, it's just a lot of these buildings have more than 1 entrance.
Our buildings have 1 entrance, so I don't get it.
They,
Or-
on
have extra.
Elmwood, like, okay, so I mean, we don't have to keep belaboring the point, I mean, we can talk about it offline, I mean, so we don't trust me about this, but. See how this building has this sidewalk going back to the rear? This is it looks like a small apartment building, but I'm not really entirely clear how the architecture works on these. But I think the rear is a unit and the front is a unit. And it's essentially on one small house lot, and then they're organized as twins. So they're actually individual structures, but they have 1 party wall. I mean, nothing about them complies with the way we're sort of envisioning.
Here's the rules for multifamily house doors. 1 and only 1 entrance to the building shall be located in the front facade. And within 12 feet of the front facade. Any other entrance in the building shall be located in the side or rear of the building.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood that. As long as we put their entrances in the back, you're
I
saying,
mean,
then it would
those
comply.
houses on Elmwood are multifamily houses.
But if we had 2 doors in the front facade, it wouldn't be allowed. I just don't, I mean, it doesn't, I just don't know why we make that rule, but it's fine. It's not worth arguing about. Heidi. Oh, by the way, I would examine the, sorry, I do think like if you look at these, again, these apartments, I don't know that they have any off-street parking. For these small apartment buildings. And I would exempt the first few units of any development from parking, but I'm not willing to hold up the rest of the zoning over that. So.
I would exempt all from parking. I would limit to 3 stories unless affordable units could be provided for a 4th story. Nothing to do with green building because that should be incorporated into it anyway. With the new building codes, and I would require a certain percentage of green space along the 2 main facades or the street facades.
How would we codify the green space?
Percentage
Of what?
of area between the building and the sidewalk,
It has to be turf, like planted?
like planted, like grade level. Open space. Public space. Not public, open space. Pedestrian friendly.
Planted space. In there.
How's that? That's fine.
Perfect.
Planted.
Right. David?
I do like the density bonus for 35 plus the height, plus the additional 10 feet. I didn't have another specific, you know, and overall support.
Okay, well, it does seem like the consensus of the commission is more or less in line with what Todd's proposed with perhaps some minor caveats related to the
green space, the reduction in the height limit, and the what's the other change that someone asked for? More or less along what Todd has outlined. So. That, which again is about the standards being applicable to different types of buildings and different lot sizes. Basically to incentivize more housing production at the end of the day. And we can keep talking about it. More, but I think that represents real progress in terms of coming up with ideas to for this particular zoning district at this time, and we can bring those to the meeting on the 26th for further discussion with the public. Or I've been sketching too. We could continue to sketch on what might be possible with that zone. So is this a reasonable stopping place?
So,
Well, Todd, I really appreciate, I know you said I twisted your arm, but I'm glad you agreed to be twisted and bring that in, so I really appreciate it. Okay, well, if there's no, is there anyone who would like to make public comment? Okay, we will, no public comments, we'll move to item 6, adjournment. Would someone like to make an emotion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll second that.
Okay, Jennifer, motion and Todd seconds to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Right.
Motion carries. Good night.
Next door.